So growing up, I used to be somewhat of a skinny fat kid. And, I sort of had these love handles and I had the man boobs and everything. And when I'm saying growing up, like I'm talking basically when I was like a little kid, like 6, 7 years old, um, I basically just used to be skinny fat. And obviously, sort of even hitting puberty, I was skinny fat, but I was sort of starting to get more self-conscious, especially about the way I looked and sort of my physique. And so obviously, like I had the face fat. I sort of hated the way I looked. I basically like had a bloated face 24/7. I kind of looked like shit most of the time, and obviously, like I had these weird red cheeks, which I honestly wasn't really sure what they were caused by back then. But I had these insane red cheeks that I would just have on me all the fucking time, and it was a pretty interesting thing. So obviously, then I sort of figure out what looks maxing is, and I sort of start to look into looks maxing and all this stuff. And I realized that I can actually sort of change this shit. And obviously, back then, all I sort of knew was, sort of lean maxing and just kind of like getting lean because that was probably the best thing for me back then if I wanted to looks max. And so that was exactly what I did. I started to lower my food intake. Back then, I didn't actually even work out. I didn't even go to the gym back then. And so it was a pretty uh, interesting sort of thing because I actually didn't do anything in a formal workout. I just sort of started to lower my food intake. And obviously, in a few weeks, I lost a whole bunch of weight. I got really skinny because I was already like sort of skinny fat, but now I just cut down. And so I just went hella skinny to the extent that I actually started to, I had like a whole bunch of mineral deficiencies and I really like got fucked up. My health got fucked up back then. I used to like faint in the middle of the class because I like when I used to go to school because of like all these mineral deficiencies and shit. And, so then I sort of fix up my nutrition and all this shit. And I, realize I shouldn't just be not eating at all, kind of the way that I was. Nonetheless, I go on a bulk, later discovering that I should actually build myself some muscle mass. And at that point, it becomes my sort of fitness journey because I sort of fitness and looks maxing are kind of like really interlinked. And so I go on a big bulk. Back then, I reached 60 kilos. Actually, the first weigh-in I've ever done, I was 60 kilos after I sort of cut down. Because back when I was fat, I didn't actually like weighing in because the weight would always sort of show as heavy. And so I just sort of never did it. And so basically the first weigh-in that I can remember was basically the 60 kilo one where I was hyper skinny. And, that was sort of when I got into the gym and I started bulking and everything. And so obviously the bulk goes on and I end up gaining like 20 kilos. It wasn't all muscle, obviously. And in about 2 or 3 bulks, I end up reaching where I am right now, which I'm like at 94 kilos. Obviously, from that time till now, like a lot of stuff have happened, regarding my looks and the different styles that I've sort of chose over, the years. But in general, one thing has kind of stuck with me. And it's kind of the first and most essential thing that you start looks maxing with. Most people neglect looks maxing and fixing their looks, and they just go all in on material success. And the reality is, although material success is very important, looks and especially the physique are dramatically, you know, essential for a man. And you sort of look at like sort of real life examples. Like, the other day I was back when I used to have Twitter on my account before I went on this dopamine detox. I was sort of scrolling on Twitter, and I was just finding all these tweets about Piers Morgan and his wife. And it was basically saying about how like he like cleans the home and his wife doesn't do anything, and his wife hangs out with other men while he's not around, and like she literally posts it. It was just some fucked up shit. And you look at all the men that she was hanging around with, and all of them had the one thing that Piers Morgan didn't have. It was the physique. It was the good looks. She was hanging around men who had a better build that she was attracted to. Yeah, she's using Piers Morgan for his money and all this shit. She probably likes him for his money. I don't think she likes him, but you know. And she's basically using him as the beta who will sort of, protect and provide for her, if you will. And, she seeks what he lacks in other men. And that's sort of how the dating scene has become these days. Women have become polygamous. They've become, the person who takes on multiple partners. And when you really look at the sort of like, primal way that, women sort of used to kind of date, in the genetic sort of DNA, it's exactly the same way. They would sort of, get themselves impregnated by the strong alpha monkey, if you will. And then they basically would find themselves a beta because the alpha doesn't stay around. He keeps obviously the male sort of DNA, sort of way of spreading his seed essentially is that he has to spread his seed everywhere. That's his main goal. That's his sort of, primal sort of way of doing things. And for the woman, it's to get impregnated by that guy and then find a beta who will basically take care of her after she's been impregnated by the alpha. And we can see this in real life. And so that's why men these days, it's just become such a difficult battleground to stay on. Because if you're really going to be dating, you have to have something that's going to make things different. You have to have a specific sort of extra maybe parameter that you look for, which will sort of change all the dating scene for you. And obviously it also means that as a man, you have to be extremely competent, meaning that you have to have one of the best physiques out there. You need to have the best looks. You need to have the best money up. You need to, basically have everything. Have every aspect that's possibly out there to be able to keep these women around. Because the moment you lack in anything, they'll just find another man who has that one thing. And they'll supplement that thing from that man. And so it's just a sad reality in the world we live in. Back then when, the world didn't have all the internet and all this stuff, people didn't know much people. There were not much people that the women could go to and supplement. And so the best man was just the husband that she was with, and so she would stick with him. Obviously, we're also ignoring the other crucial part of it, which is religion. When someone is religious and they actually, especially the women, because the women are the ones who really need to focus on this point. And when the women are religious, they won't be mischievous. They won't, go around and do pesky, promiscuous things. And so, when we have religion as the main sort of, thing we rely on, then we have a lot better of a society. Issue is, people don't follow religion. People aren't religious. People just like to fuck around and do a whole bunch of shit. And they completely, ignore the reality that God is watching. And when that day of judgment comes around, people are going to get fucked. They're going to get sent straight to hell because they wasted this life that was meant to be used in some way. And so, regardless, now we turn to a whole religious lecture. We as men need to basically build ourselves into the best kind of man out there. And oftentimes that means basically working on our fitness, our looks, our, character, our status, our money, and having all of these things together so that she won't need to supplement from another man. Because any little lack you have, she will supplement from another man. That's just the way the world works now. And what's funny enough is I always recommend that people start their self-improvement journey with going to the gym. That's like step 0. And it's because going to the gym really just anchors you in the ground. It makes you a completely different kind of man. It not only fixes your looks, because your face gets a lot better when you sort of get leaner and you sort of, if you're fat and if you're skinny, you sort of bulk up and you build yourself a good physique. In general, it will work on all the aspects. It'll build you a discipline necessary to chase money and chase a good character. It'll build you the character. It'll give you a lot of status later on because you basically start, people start to look at your physique and they're like, God damn, this guy's fucking amazing. I want to hang around him because he's fucking huge. He looks amazing and he's got all these different things. Ask the guy who knows. I've tried this shit and I fucking, the amount of people who come up to me on the fucking streets. I don't even know them. I'm not even famous yet, bro. Like I have like 300 subscribers, bro. Like I'm not famous. And these people will literally come at me and they'll want to hang around with me. That's just the way it is. You command respect. You have a lot of status and people just want to fucking, jump on your back. That's just the way it is. And so we got to understand that to think that one activity will literally improve you in all areas of your life. It literally will improve you in every area of your life, going to the gym. And so why the hell wouldn't you go to the gym? Which is why I always recommend it as the first step, whether it's in your looksmaxing, your self-improvement, in anything. Because the reality is going to the gym will help you in all these different aspects of your life. What's funny enough is once you sort of build yourself a good physique, everything comes easy. The status comes easy. The money comes easy. The girls come easy. Like everything just gets easy once you become a Chad. And, obviously fixing the looks is sort of like a separate thing. Like obviously when you sort of fix your looks, you kind of have to do extra stuff, not just go to the gym. And, recently I've sort of done a lot of these things where I sort of would, I took steroids and I sort of took testosterone and everything to kind of like fix my sort of like basically develop a more masculine facial structure. And obviously these are like more advanced things that one would sort of do, in their looksmaxing. But, the one thing that you would always sort of start with is, and the thing that most people wouldn't fucking want to do is just hit the fucking gym. Start going to the gym. Start managing your food. If you're fat, cut down. If you're skinny, then bulk up. You're in need of this shit. If you're skinny and you aren't bulking up, you need to fucking bulk up so you can build yourself a good frame. The amount of people who think that if they're skinny, they're going to be attractive is crazy. And the reality is skinny guys just aren't fucking attractive. And so that's one thing. Obviously the fat dudes. Now, I have a different look on skinny fat guys because usually I recommend that they bulk since they're already kind of skinny and they've already kind of got the fat. It won't really hurt them to bulk up, but a lot of them emotionally just won't accept it, and so they'll just kind of cut first. And there's nothing wrong with it. It just adds another step. Like you're gonna cut now, then you're gonna bulk, then you're gonna cut after you bulk. Why not just bulk now and then cut? That's kind of the way I think about it. But it's something that I even sort of fell into because back when I was skinny fat, I would have never bulked. I would have just chose the cut. And so that was sort of the thing. And people told me to bulk. I just sort of cut. And so looksmaxing starts with you going to the gym. Once you start going to the gym and managing your food, that's basically your start for looksmaxing. Obviously, you can sort of look into skincare routines and all this stuff. But the reality is, I don't really think that these things are crucial because oftentimes, like you really like kind of wash away, like you want to wash away the pimples by having a skincare routine. Sure, you could just also eat healthier foods. Wouldn't that just work? And obviously, to the same extent, someone who is bulking is obviously going to get a lot of freaking pimples and acne because, you're bulking, you're eating a lot of food, whether it's healthy or not healthy, you're going to get a lot of freaking acne because you're in an unhealthy state. So naturally, you're going to get a lot of acne. I was bulking, and obviously, I have a whole bunch of acne, all over the place. And so that's sort of the main deal. Now, obviously, other things that come after you sort of start going to the gym, like there are certain things you sort of figure out your style, how you like to dress, how you like your, like haircut to be, how you like having a beard, not having a beard, all this stuff. Those things come secondary. In general, the way I sort of do these things is, I just sort of see what I like, like just look at like when you sort of look at different sort of styles, just look at different styles of men and be like, I like this one. I don't like this one. I like to have a long beard. I don't like to have a long beard. Whatever it may be. And basically just pick it. For a long time, I had this sort of short hair. And I sort of had it for school because when I had long hair in school, they would just sort of tell me to cut it. And, they were stingy bastards, so they would just kind of fucking stick up my ass. So eventually I sort of had the short haircut that I'm sort of, like 2 years ago I sort of had. And recently I started growing my hair again once I dropped out of high school. Because, I realized, I like having long hair. And now I'm growing out my hair. Obviously it's gotten a lot better over, the sort of recent few weeks. But like, obviously it was sort of sucky when I first started growing it. But yeah, the main deal is find the style that you like. If you like something, don't let people tell you to do something else. Just fucking find your own authentic style. And that happens by just fucking searching for it, really. And start fucking building it for yourself. If you want to grow a beard, then grow a beard. You want to grow your hair, grow your hair. You want to cut your hair, cut your hair. That's the main fucking deal. And regardless, the final thing I would mention about Looksmaxing, which is, it's commonsensical. People should already be doing this. It's just taking care of yourself, hygiene, having a good perfume that you use, cutting your nails. Like, I don't need to mention these things. Brushing your teeth, flossing your teeth. Like, those should be quite commonsensical things that every man does. Obviously plucking your armpits, shaving. That's basically the main fucking deal. That's all you really need for Looksmaxing stage 1 to sort of get yourself on and started with Looksmaxing. And obviously second stages come later once you sort of have built yourself a good frame and you sort of, people would sort of take testosterone and everything. You could totally do that to sort of fix the, sort of face structure, especially if the face structure of yours, like, especially if you're nearing the end of your puberty and, you want to fix your face structure because it's quite feminine, then you could obviously do that. But that's basically all I could really think about. At the end of the day, I wouldn't say that I'm black-pilled necessarily, that all I care about, the most important thing is looks, but it's certainly something that's very important. And a man who doesn't take good care of his looks and just focuses on the money ends up being cheated on with a guy that has fixed up his looks. And so that's why we gotta just fucking fix up this shit. And at the end of the day, most people who Looksmax to get girls. Like, that's just kind of that's why I've been framing this entire video around girls in the dating scene, because that's really just the way I sort of see Looksmaxing. Looksmaxing is quite literally just to get girls. For most people. Some guys are gay, whatever, fine. Like, they just won't admit that shit. But like, that's just kind of the reality for most straight men, which I assume all the people watching this video are straight. And so that's basically all there really is to it for this video. Obviously, I'll be talking a lot more about Looksmaxing and all these kind of different things. But this was just kind of like the first video about Looksmaxing on the channel. Obviously, I do a lot of different videos. I mostly talk about self-improvement and fitness. But obviously, there's a whole bunch of other shit that I talk about on this channel. So obviously, if you're new here, you can subscribe. If you like this video, if you want to see more like this one. And obviously, if you're interested in getting one-to-one help from me in your own self-improvement, Looksmaxing, fitness, journeys, you could basically DM me on Instagram. I basically do coaching calls so I can help you out one-on-one. And obviously, if you're interested in getting more in-depth accountability, like 6-month coaching program, where I basically like stick in with you. I gave you my phone number literally, and I just basically like stick with you in this sort of, fitness journey of yours till you achieve the result that you're looking for. You can basically check out the Thrive Attainer, which is the second link in the description. And as long as you commit to the work, you'll be getting your results.